Welcome to Development Book Club. Today we will conclude with the Numerical Discourses of the Buddha. And remember again that this book is an anthology of suttas from the Anguttara Nikaya. So this is with the notes, about 315 pages. And the full Anguttara Nikaya is, I believe, 13 or 1,500 pages. So these have been selected by Bhikkhu Bodhi and Mr. Thera. We will conclude today with books 9, 10, and 11. Back in the chapter of the nines, there's a sutta called Freed of Fivefold Fear. Nice alliteration. And it says, so after laying out the four powers, which are wisdom, energy, and unblemished life, and beneficence, the Buddha mentions that a noble disciple endowed with these four powers has left behind 5 fears. And there's 9 things in total. Fear for his livelihood, fear of disrepute, fear of embarrassment in assemblies, the fear of death, and the fear of an unhappy future destiny or rebirth. He continues. I want to read for you here just a quick thing. He says, a noble disciple thus endowed with these 4 powers and not these fears, thus endowed will think, quote, no fear do I have for my livelihood. Why should I have fear about it? Have I not the 4 powers of wisdom, energy, unblemished life, and beneficence? It is one who is foolish and lazy, of blameworthy conduct in deeds, words and thoughts, and who has no beneficence. Such a one might have fear for his livelihood. No fear do I have about disrepute or about embarrassment in assemblies, nor have I fear of death or an unhappy future destiny. Why should I have these fears? Have I not the 4 powers of wisdom, energy, unblemished life, and beneficence? It is one who is foolish and lazy, of blameworthy conduct in deeds, words, or thoughts, who has no beneficence. Such a one might have all these fears. We'll continue in the 9s with the 10, we're in the 10s now, on the 10 reflections of a monk, which is a very short sutta. He says, there are, O monks, these 10 things that one who has gone forth as a monk should often reflect upon. What 10? I have entered upon a classless condition. This should often be reflected upon by one gone forth as a monk. And this is, again, from the context of an Indian society with castes and everything. A classless condition. Number 2, my life is dependent upon the generosity of others. 3, my manner of conduct must be different from those of householders. And again, householders were followers of the Buddha who still had, let's say, regular jobs and weren't full-time. Number 4, do I reproach myself in regard to virtue? Number 5, do my wise fellow monks reproach me in regard to virtue? 6, I must be separated and parted from all that is dear and beloved to me. This comes from one of those suttas about impermanence from earlier. 7, I am the owner of my actions, the heir of my actions. Actions are the womb from which I have sprung. Actions are my relations. Actions are my protection. Whatever actions I do, good or bad, of these I shall become the heir. How do I spend my days and nights? Number 8, how do I delight in empty huts? And then this is something where they say that they will often go into the forest or to the trees and sit under a tree or an empty hut to meditate. So how do I delight in empty huts? And 10, have I attained any superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones, so that if I am questioned by my fellow monks at the time of my death, I shall not be dismayed. Unquote. This should often be reflected upon by one gone forth as a monk. These are the 10 things that one gone forth as a monk should often reflect upon. Continuing, there's a section on self-examination, and there's a pretty interesting image the author, so I'll just read you. So at the beginning it says, if, O monks, a monk is not skilled in knowing the ways of others' minds, he should resolve, quote, I must become skilled in knowing the ways of my own mind, unquote. Thus, monks, should you train yourselves. And at the end of this sutta on self-examination, he says, just as a man whose clothes or turban are on fire would apply his utmost zeal and energy, effort and exertion, as well as mindfulness and clear comprehension, so that he may extinguish the fire. Even so, the monk should apply his utmost zeal and energy for the abandoning of those evil, unwholesome qualities. Further on in the chapter of the 10s, there's a sutta called the Extinction of Kamma, and it's kind of mentioned as success in living. The Buddha says there are, monks, successes in living caused by wholesome volition, issuing in happiness, resulting in happiness. They are threefold in bodily acts, fourfold in verbal acts, and threefold in mental acts. So this is sort of we could say an ethics, a Buddhist ethics here. So there's bodily acts, verbal acts, and mental acts. The threefold bodily acts that may ring a bell for you all, which is that there is a person who abstains from the destruction of life. With the rod and the weapon laid aside, he is conscientious and kind and kindly, and swells compassionate towards all living beings. He does not take what is not given to him. This is the way that Buddhists, maybe in Christianity, would say, like, thou shalt not steal. Buddhists phrase it as, you shall not take what is not given to you. Number 3, he gives up sexual misconduct and abstains from it. We've spoken about going into more detail about what that looks like for monks. The fourfold in verbal acts. There is a person who has given up false speech and abstains from it. He has given up divisive speech and abstains from it. What he has heard here, he will not report elsewhere to foment conflict there. He unites those who are divided and encourages those who are in harmony. He has given up harsh speech and abstains from it. Those are the 4 verbal acts or lack of acts. And then finally, threefold in mental acts. Here is a person free from covetousness. He does not covet the wealth and property of others, thinking, oh, what he owns might belong to me. He has no ill will in his heart. He has pure thoughts and intentions such as these. Quote, may these beings be free from enmity, free from anxiety. May they be untroubled and live happily. He has a right view and a correct perspective such as this. Quote, there is moral value in gifts, offerings, and sacrifice. There is fruit and recompense from deeds good or evil. There is both this world and another world. There are duties toward mother and father. And then he concludes, just as a perfect throw of dice, when thrown upwards, will come to rest firmly wherever it falls. Similarly, due to success in living caused by wholesome volition, beings will be reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. And I will conclude with 2 suttas from the chapter of the 11s. Is really short. There are only 2 suttas included in this book, and I want to read a little bit from both, because there's a cool metaphor of horses, and then the final one that's included is on the blessings of loving kindness, or metta. We begin with the horses. So the Buddha asks, and how, speaking with someone named Sanda, S-A-N-D-H-A, he says, and how, Sanda, does a wild colt meditate? When a wild colt is tied up near the feeding trough, he meditates, fodder, fodder. For what reason? Because a wild colt is tied up by the feeding trough, it does not occur to him, what task will my trainer set for me today? And what can I do for him in return? He just meditates, fodder, fodder. So too, Sanda, says the Buddha, a wild colt of a man, when gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, dwells with a mind obsessed and oppressed by sensual lust, and he does not understand as it really is the escape from arisen sensual lust. Nurturing sensual lust from within, he meditates to and meditates fro, meditates up and meditates down. Goes on for a bit, and he talks about sort of the converse to the other side. And he says, and how, Sanda, does a thoroughbred of a man meditate? When a good thoroughbred horse is tied up near the feeding trough, he does not meditate, fodder, fodder. That's F-O-D-D-E-R, by the way, a word for food or dried hay, not fodder. For what reason? Because when a good thoroughbred horse is tied up by the feeding trough, it occurs to him, quote, what task will my trainer set for me today, and what can I do for him in return? He does not meditate, fodder, fodder. For that good thoroughbred horse regards the application of the goad as a debt, a bond, a fine, and a loss. So too, Sanda, a good thoroughbred of a man, when gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, does not dwell with a mind obsessed and oppressed by sensual lust, and he understands as it really is the escape from arisen sensual lust. And we'll conclude with number 208, the very last sutta included in this book, the blessings of loving kindness. If, O monks, the liberation of the mind by loving kindness is developed and cultivated, frequently practiced, made one's vehicle and foundation, firmly established, consolidated, and properly undertaken, 11 blessings may be expected. What 11. One sleeps peacefully. One sees no bad dreams. One is dear to human beings. One is dear to non-human beings. One will be protected by devas. Fire, poison, and weapons cannot injure one. One's mind becomes easily concentrated. Imagine that. Sounds nice. One's facial complexion will be serene. One will die unconfused. Also really cool. And if one does not penetrate higher, one will be reborn in the Brahma world. And thus we conclude the chapter of 11s and the numerical discourses of the Buddha, at least this very, very, very abridged anthology. And thank you for watching.